All right, we're going to be reading chapter 13 of The Meaning of Maggie. All right. Around mid-March, the halls at school filled with the glorious smell of rubber cement, the sharp sound of scissors cutting construction paper, and the wonderful buzz of facts being questioned over and over again. It was time for the science fair, and it wasn't just any science fair. This was the science fair where I would be defending my blue ribbon. This year, before I won top prize for an amazing, no-holds-barred expose on rainforest destruction, I'd written an extensive report filled with facts and interviews with local tree-hugging hippies. And for my big ta-da, I hadn't done one of those typical, super boring, three-paneled boards everyone else had done. With Mom's help, I stapled together over 100 giant sheets of bulletin board paper and rolled them out across the gym floor. Each piece of paper represented 100 square miles of rainforest destroyed. It had been a precise dramatization of the crazy amount of rainforest that was chopped down every hour, and it had clinched my victory. I'd walked away with my head held high, triumphantly, and I'd even gotten my picture in the paper, which was fun, but ironic because the local paper is probably printed on paper made from the rainforest trees. Anyway, I'd won. I'd gotten a blue ribbon, and I was going back for another. Mom and Dad knew the science fair meant a lot to me, and they did whatever they could do to help. Mom excused me from my chores for a couple of weeks so I could immerse myself in research and Werther's Originals. And Dad helped me comb through National Geographics, even the scary ones with naked tribal people. And their help made Tiffany furious because she had to do her chores and mine for a few weeks. But whatever. I was trying to change the world. The only thing she ever changed was boyfriends. I usually announced my science fair topic in a big to-do at dinner. Dad would drum roll his fingers on the table, and when he stopped, I'd announce my topic, and Mom and Dad would ooh and ah because they're my number one fans. And you need your number one fans when you're doing big stuff. But this year, I was keeping my topic a secret. A top secret to be revealed when I was too far into research for my parents to make me choose another topic, which I knew they would do as soon as they found out that I hadn't picked just any of the world's problems to research. I'd chosen a problem that lived in our own house. This year, I was doing my project on Dad. I was going to get one step closer to fixing him. When Mom and Tiffany dropped me off at the library, Mom begged me to tell her what I was doing. Come on, Maggie, a hint. I rubbed my hands together like a mad scientist. In due time, my lady, in due time. Tiffany rolled her eyes. You're such a weirdo. Mom gave her a mom look. Knock it off. Maggie, we'll be back after we get your sister a pair of jeans. Okay. I reached for my backpack from the back seat and gave Tiffany my most brilliant smile. Hey, Tiffany, know what else you should get at the mall? What? A new face. Slam. Mom drove away, and I high-fived myself for ending on such a zinger. I opened the library door, and the smell of knowledge and dust hit me in the face. I loved everything about the library. I loved the rows and rows of books. I loved the cranky old ladies who read about knitting while knitting. I loved the book alarm that caught book thieves. I loved that while technology progressed, I could still depend on books because no one ever lied in books. And I loved that the librarian loved books just as much as I did. And she brought me juice boxes and pretzels when I was studying, and I enjoyed them even though you're never supposed to eat or drink in the library. but she was in charge, and while the pretzels were sourdough and the juice was cranapple, my favorites. I set up my research lab at my preferred table next to the A/F American History row. It was the only table in the whole place that didn't wobble, and today it was mine, all mine. I spread out my pretzels and my papers and my color-coded index cards, pink for encyclopedia facts, blue for other reference book facts, and yellow for random thoughts along the way. I started with the basics, the elusive M encyclopedia. I began at the end and found what I was looking for between Morpheus, the Greek god of dreams, and Mumbai, which is in India, where cows walk around in the streets like they're people. I had never seen all 17 letters of Dad's disease in print before. MULTIPLESCLEROSIS. They look like a big deal. I sounded the words out phonetically under my breath so I could understand them fully. Each letter carried a different weight of its own. The M wasn't warm and cozy like a muffin. It was cold and distant like Mars. And the S curved like a snake, but instead of scales, I imagined it was made up of thousands of pins and needles, like the ones that picked and pinched Dad's hands and feet from the inside out. All 17 letters together felt heavy, heavier than an elephant, heavier than a white whale shark, heavier than the biggest meteor in all the universe. It was a heaviness. It was a heaviness that metaphorically weighed me down from head to toe. I pushed the encyclopedia away, not wanting the letters to touch me. For the first time, I was scared of catching Dad's disease, because right then I realized I didn't know as much about his disease as I thought. In fact, according to the facts, I hardly knew anything. It was time to pull up my bootstraps like I'd never had before. It was time to get to work. I filled my pink note cards with one new something after another. Dad's disease was an inflammatory disease in which the fatty myelin sheaths around the axons of the brain and spinal cord are damaged, leading to demyelization and scarring, as well as a broad spectrum of signs and symptoms. I didn't know what any of that meant, but it sounded serious. Next, I moved on to the symptoms. There were so many, I decided to highlight the ones Dad had. Symptoms included tingling, prickling, or numbness in the extremities, muscle weakness or difficulty moving, difficulties with coordination and balance, problems in speech or swallowing, visual problems, fatigue, loss of bladder control, cognitive impairment, intermittent tremors, sensitivity to heat, unstable mood, depression, and paralysis, either partial or complete. I had seen all of these words before, but never all in one place, and never specifically related to Dad. My eyes leapt ahead of my brain. I was reading things I didn't understand. I had goosebumps everywhere you get goosebumps. There was no clear cause. It wasn't a cold. It wasn't something you could catch. The medicines had long names, and no one knew if they really worked. The disease evolved over decades, and there were two types of it. One kind went away and came back. Another type never went away and only got worse. There were varying degrees of severity with both. Then I read the last thing in the last paragraph of the entry. There was no known cure. There, period, was, period, no, period, known, period, cure. A big lump formed in my throat, my eyes filled with water, but it wasn't tears. It was sweat from my brain's working double time. I closed my eyes and let the brain sweat roll down my face. My brain was learning things my heart didn't want to know, and it was making me mad. How could my parents keep all this from me? Did they even know everything that I now know? Unlikely, since I never saw them do any research. And how could these scientists and doctors be perfectly okay with calling things unknown or inconclusive? They needed to get with it, do their jobs, put on their goggles, and not take them off until they've put together all the pieces of the puzzle. Maybe start with the corner pieces and then work toward the middle. And if they were missing a piece, they should have looked under the couch. As soon as I exhausted my mad at them, I even got more mad at myself. Why had I never thought about all of this before? I mean, I spent so much time with Dad, and most of the time his arms and legs were asleep, but I never really thought about waking them up. I looked down at my hands. They looked just like his. We even had the same palm lines and knuckle creases, but mine were awake and his were falling asleep, maybe forever. Why was I just now realizing all of this? Actually, I kind of assumed before that the sleepiness was caused by doing the bad sort of things that I knew Dad had done, like not doing his homework, dropping out of college, dodging the draft, and lying to his neighbors by telling them it was Tiffany blasting the loud music. I thought it was a kind of punishment that he would eventually pay off. His time out would end. He would come out of the corner and out of the chair and do good deeds for the rest of his life, like save kittens from trees and bald eagles from extinction, and we would live happily ever after in a treehouse like the Swiss Family Robinson, where I would get my own bamboo room, and we would look back on the days of when his arms and legs were asleep, and we would say, "Phew, glad that's over." But now I knew that it would never be over. Now I knew there was no way to fix Dad. And then I had a thought that almost made me choke on my Werther's Original. But I made myself stop thinking the thought. There was research to be done, and I was going to do it. I immediately dove into all kinds of scientific books. Before I knew it, I had burned through all but 3 note cards. I was so lost in research that I didn't even notice Mom standing right next to me. She tugged on my scarf. "Hey, Maggie, ready to go?" I quickly made a guard with my arm so she couldn't see my notes, and I piled every book into my backpack before she could see the titles. I gripped my note cards in my hands and kept my eyes on the door. All I had to do was make it to the car. Then the coast would be clear. Tiffany would tell me about her jeans and how a size 0 is still too big on her, and I would respond with some witty yet brilliant remark, and Mom would tell us to quit it. But as soon as I walked through the door, the book alarm sounded. The librarian lady, juice box giver, called me back to the desk and made me open my backpack. There it was, the M Encyclopedia. She shook her head. "You know you can't check out reference materials." I was mortified. "Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry. It was an accident. Since it was my first offense, she let me off without giving me a book felony or sending me to book jail." "Aha," Mom said. "So, I know the topic starts with M. Machu Picchu? Macaroni and cheese?" I threw my scarf over my shoulder. "No, Mom. I'll tell you later." I didn't know when later would actually be. I thought it might be much, much later, like maybe even after I had finished the report. But I just had so many little questions and one big question that couldn't wait. So later turned it out to be dinner. Everyone was at the table. Mom was in her seat, cutting up Dad's chicken. Dad was in his wheelchair, waiting to eat. Tiffany and Layla were putting their rolls back in the basket because they ate carbs the day before, and they only ate carbs every other day. And I was pushing my carrots around my plate while Dad asked Layla if she'd finished her English paper. Layla said she hadn't because she still wasn't sure what to write. Dad told her just make something up, because that's what he always did. Mom hit him on the leg, even though I now know he couldn't feel it, and told Layla to write something from her heart. Tiffany batted her eyelashes and said, "Write about Bobby. He's in your heart." And then Layla threw a roll at her, then Tiffany threw it back, and then I blurted out, "Is Dad gonna die?" Dad dropped his fork, and not because it slipped. Layla was wide-eyed. Tiffany kicked me under the table. Mom said what I knew she'd say. "Of course not, honey. Why would you say that?" I unwrapped my scarf to let my neck breathe. I'm researching Dad's disease for the science fair. I read some of the things at the library today. I was afraid that was the M, Mom said, but I was really pulling for macaroni and cheese. Dad kept his eyes on her as he pushed his chair back from the table. I thought they were going to disappear into the garage, like they always did, but he stayed put. "Who wants a cocktail?" "I want a cocktail." He pointed at Mom. "Do you want a cocktail?" Mom stood up. "I would love a cocktail. I'll go fix us cocktails." Cocktails? Really? I didn't want to time travel. I didn't want to hear stories or learn any lessons or talk about old hippie stuff. I wanted to know what was happening right now. Tiffany called out to Mom, "I'll take a cocktail." Layla nodded. "Me too." I felt myself beginning to cave. I needed something to take the edge off. Sometimes on New Year's Eve, Dad let us have a sip of his champagne while Mom wasn't looking. And then Mom would yell from the kitchen, "I can see you." And then she would get the giggles, which I thought meant we were tipsy, but Tiffany said that was impossible from one sip. I raised my hand. "Make mine a double." Dad yelled back to Mom, "Honey, the girls want cocktails." "Okay. 2 rum and cokes and 3 Shirley Temples coming up." "Great. A mocktail. She better give me 2 cherries." I needed 2 cherries. I let Dad take a sip of his drink, and then I made him give it to me straight. "Dad, are you going to die?" He took another big gulp. "No, absolutely not. I'm not going anywhere. Maybe one day when I'm a really old man. But look at me. I'm young, and I still have great hair, which means I'm too good looking to die. Everyone knows good looking people don't die." "Okay, fair enough. Are you going to get sicker?" Mom took her seat and answered for him. "Not necessarily. Your dad's really strong. Sure, we've had our setbacks, but what do we always do, Maggie?" The family motto now. "We pull up our bootstraps." Mom nodded. "Exactly." They asked if I had any more questions. I definitely did. I wanted to talk science. How could we find a cure? What could I have invented to help? Was there any truth to the whole spoonful of sugar thing from Mary Poppins? Because I'd be willing to eat sugar with him if it was true, for moral support. All this time, Layla was super quiet. which wasn't necessarily unusual when Dad and I were dropping science. But when I looked over, tears were pooling her mascara into a black puddle, and she was trying to keep from spilling down her cheeks by staring at the ceiling. When she couldn't hold the dam any longer, she asked if she could be excused and got up from the table without waiting for an answer. "What's wrong with Layla?" I asked. "I think it's allergies," Mom said. "You know, the dogwoods are blooming. I'll take her some medicine." Mom disappeared, and then it was just Dad. Tiffany and me at the table with all the questions. I was getting out my note cards when Tiffany asked, "So, what are all the pills for?" Aha, maybe I wasn't the only one in the dark. Dad ran through the pharmacy. The oblong one keeps me from getting the shakes. The purple and white ones keep my spirits up. And I don't know what the red one does, but it looks like one I took out in the desert in the 70s. Geez, I wrinkled my nose. "I don't think you're supposed to tell us that kind of stuff." He laughed. "I thought we were being honest." Mom came out of Layla's room, and her eyes were red now too. She took her seat and sipped from her mostly empty glass. "Is there anything else you would like to know about, Maggie?" She looked at me with the same look on her face that she had when she broke the news to me about the Easter Bunny. I hid my note cards. "No, ma'am." "Well, that's all we know, Maggie. That's all anyone knows." I turned to Dad. "Are you scared?" He shook his head and puffed up his chest. "Never." I believed him. Then I remembered I had one more question. Should we be going to church? I knew God wasn't a doctor, and we never learned about him in science class, but maybe we should be covering all our bases. Should we be praying for a miracle? Dad asked Mom for more ice, and she disappeared into the kitchen. "I think God has his hands full right now, Maggie," which was true. All that stuff with the rainforest alone must have been keeping him pretty busy, but I couldn't let it go. Maybe we should start going again. Why did we stop? Mom returned with Dad's drink, which was full, but not with ice. He took a sip. "It's just too crowded." That made sense. Everyone in church was praying for their own miracles, which didn't leave any room for ours. Their prayers were crowding the path to heaven. If we went to church, our prayers would have circled for hours before ever landing. Our prayers needed a lot of room to be heard. We needed to be praying in open fields or in the backyard, or at the very least, in our rooms at night. "Do you pray, Dad?" Dad looked at me. "Every night." That night, I'm pretty sure we all prayed. I hadn't prayed in a while because, honestly, I had everything I ever wanted. Good books, good hair, great grades. But that night, I prayed with all my might. I asked God to save Dad, to cure him, and please, for the love of himself, do something about the dogwoods. The next morning, Mom and Dad didn't make me pick a new topic, but they did make me promise to ask them questions along the way and let them read the report before I turned it in. We shook on it, and I got back to work. After a couple days, I was positive I had the winning project again. For my big ta-da piece, I drew a picture of Dad and diagrammed where everything was happening. I drew arrows where the sleepiness was pulling him this way and that way. Then, with his help, I also put in some cool dude stuff. The arrow next to his eyes said, "Sometimes my eyes are blurry, but they'll never forget the sight of Jimi Hendrix playing the Star-Spangled Banner on his electric guitar, which these eyeballs saw in 1969. The arrow next to his brain said, Sometimes his brain does a lot of tricky things, but it will never forget a single word to Stairway to Heaven. We finished with a bunch more arrows and facts. I turned my project in and eagerly waited 3 days for an A. But on day 3, when I got my project back, it was a B. I was devastated. One catch to the science fair, and that only A's. One catch to the science fair was that only A's could be entered, ensuring that only the very best projects competed for the top prize. Getting a B kept me from entering at all. I scrambled to the last page of my report and read Mrs. Hanbury's explanation. While I love the personal touches throughout the paper and the extensive research, science fair rules state that you have to propose a solution to your topic's problem. And Maggie, you presented no solution. Next year, pick a problem you can solve. Seriously, lady? Read the report. There's no cure. What did she want from me? Even scientists couldn't solve this problem. I stayed after class to challenge the grade, but Miss Hanbury wouldn't budge. She insisted she couldn't bend the science fair rules. My blue ribbon days were no more. I went home and told Dad, and he was so mad that he asked me to put him in the car and drive him down to the school. I can't drive, Dad. I can barely ride a bike. Fine, he said, and we waited for Mom to get home so she could drive him down where we would raise HE double hockey sticks. At first, I had the fight in me, but then I had to concede because Miss Hanbury was right. I don't think there's anything she can do, Dad. Dad wheeled close to me. But you work so hard. We both did. I never worked so hard on a school project in my whole life. But I didn't follow the rules. I didn't solve any problems. Well, if that's how you really feel, then okay. But I still think you deserve to win. I didn't agree with him. The winner was supposed to have a clear solution, and all that I had were more questions. The only thing I had confirmed was sometimes you end up learning things you wish you hadn't, and you can't unlearn them. I couldn't unknow that there was no cure, that there was no fixing Dad. I couldn't unthink that more scary stuff was going to happen. I couldn't unwonder if the worst was yet to come. I could just hope that he was right about one thing. Good-looking people don't die. All right, that was chapter 13. Come back for chapter 14 later.